Three presenters today. I'm Morten Dudal, and I'm from the Danish Board of District Heating. Many of you already know me. We will organize this webinar in such a way. First of all, we will not use more than 60 minutes. We've already used 2. There will be 3 presentations, then 4 presentations actually. Then I will moderate a panel discussion between the 3 speakers based on the 4 presentations, and not least based on all your chat comments. You're most welcome to use the chat. Just write something in there. Comments that is directly, specifically to the presentation. I may bring that up right after we have heard the presentation, but normally I will postpone your comments until the panel debate in the end. After the panel debate, the webinar as such will finalize, but I know from experience that there are a bunch of you who will have a series of detailed questions to the different presenters we have invited to give a presentation today, and there will be plenty of room to discuss details with them. If some of you ask very specific questions, that will probably end up there. It's exactly like this live seminar where we, after the presenters have finalized and the panel debate have been there, we all stand up in line to ask very specific questions to the presenters. This is the same we'll do today, later today. With that said, With that said, let me shortly introduce you to the 3 presenters. One is Milan Jungik. He's Senior Project Manager of Danfoss. He's a lucky guy. He will have the opportunity to give us 2 presentations. One, impacts of digitalization in district energy. We'll start with that one. And in the end, he'll be back and give a presentation called the Overall Integration of End-to-End Solution to District Energy System. After Milan, we'll have Jokan Aho. He's the Managing Director of Lean Heat. They have developed a fantastic tool. He will talk about artificial intelligence as enabler of building optimization and peak load shaving, one of the topics we all fight with in our district heating daily life. And in the end, no, not in the end, but after Jukka, Leif will be here, Leif Müller-Jacobsen, Business Development Manager from Danfoss, who will have a series of slides on the state-of-the-art solutions for primary site operational and design optimization. Some of these words are really hard to get through, but we'll manage that for sure today. In the end, you can sign up to receive the slide sets. Give us your email, and we'll make sure you get that. Plus, of course, you will also get a version of our latest Hot Cool. That's Danish. That is our magazine. And I'll say it again: use the chat. With that said, let me say hello to Milan. Milan, please unmute your speaker or your phone, and your presentation is ready in a second. There it is. Go ahead, Milan, speak to us.
Thank you, Morten. So, can you hear me loud and clear?
We can hear you loud and clear. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I'm still waiting for presentation to load. Maybe just wait a few seconds. I'm still on the, okay. There it is. Morten? Okay. So, thank you, Morten. Welcome to all also from our side on this DBDH webinar, where me and my colleagues, Jukka and Leif, will present you an end-to-end solution for district energy systems that we are developing in Danfoss. So, As you will notice through all four presentations, the red line is actually how we can use state-of-the-art technologies to support green energy transition in district energy systems, using digitalization through basically the entire district energy system. So from plant to the home, to the end user, to make the system smarter, more efficient, and also more reliable. And also, digitalization has huge implications on how efficiently we can design new district energy systems and extensions, as you will see in presentations later on. If you look how district energy systems evolved in past, transition between first generation to third generation was basically the story of going from high temperature steam-based systems to medium temperature systems. But when we look where we are currently in the 4G and also with fifth generation on the horizon, besides going to lower temperatures and improved efficiency, we are also focusing on how to include renewable sources, waste heat sources. There's a lot of talk about sector integration with power networks. And that being said, basically today challenges related with optimal planning and operation of district energy systems are much bigger and complex. On one side, we are going from one source to multiple sources, and it's making production and distribution process, the decision process much more complex. Sector integration as such provides new benefits to economy of our systems that need to be considered during operation. But on the other side, the shift to lower temperatures and improved efficiency also means that we are running our systems much more on the edge of what is needed. So margin for error is lower, and ensuring quality of supply to our end users is again a much bigger challenge than it used to be. Of course, digitalization as a topic, as a tool, can support us in tackling these new challenges by providing us tools to predict the demand based on historical data and weather prediction, so that we have kind of a look into the future to accommodate for the transport times in district energy networks. It enables us to interconnect demand with production, balance both in real time, and run our network on technically and also economically best combination of production units, temperatures, and flows at any given time in moment. Additionally, digitalization also allows us to empower our users, tap into networking effects with different kind of methods like motivational tariffs, offer end users additional ESCO type services, predictive maintenance, auto commissioning services, for them to stay ahead of competitive heating solutions. So it supports also utilities in expanding their business from being a simple heat supplier to a more ESCO-oriented company. In Danfoss, of course, we believe that district energy is the most sustainable approach for mitigation of climate changes, for transition to a decarbonized society. And this is why we decided to build on strong foundations of advanced control components with digital solutions enabling optimal control for both demand and supply side. But when we talk about optimization of district energy, of course, we need to get the basic rights. There is no optimal district energy system without optimal demand. Therefore, when we start optimizing, we need to start with demand. And as you will see in the presentations following, our tools can support you in predicting the demand and optimizing the demand side, in design and operation of distribution networks so that you can operate and distribute optimally. And at the end, it helps us to decide how to produce energy from our sources with best economy. Of course, to make it an overall solution, these three solutions or parts of this energy need to be interconnected and need to run hand in hand. And with that being said, I will hand over the word to my colleague, Jukka.
Thank you,
okay,
Milan.
I can hear. Yep.
Thank you, Milan. I think we'll we need to see what Jukka looks like. He's exactly on my next slide set. Thank you, Milan, to this slide over your considerations about district heating. Jukka, it's you now. Give it 2 seconds for the slides to load properly. It's pretty much there, I see. And then go ahead, Jukka. Tell us about Lean Heat and what value and solutions you can provide.
Thank you, Morten. Yeah, should I wait for another 2 seconds? Okay. So yeah, thank you, Milan, for the intro there as well, and Morten. So the key content I'm going to talk about is how can we optimize demand, and why should we actually do that? And let's start with the why. So if we look at the energy systems of tomorrow, we will have more and more renewable sources of energy in the systems. Also in the district heating systems, we will have more heat pumps, we will have more heating components that are connected to electricity. And renewable sources, they are not always available. So we need flexibility. And flexibility is not cheap. So what we see is that existing buildings that we have already built, there's a huge capacity for flexibility. By increasing the temperature of indoor climate just by 0.5 degrees, we can store a huge amount of energy into the envelope of buildings. And this is using our existing infrastructure. And this way we can make these buildings batteries of energy, or we also call them virtual power plants. And with this, we can use these buildings to optimize the whole energy system. And of course, the value here is that we can use energy when it's more economical and it's better for the climate. So how do we make the demand optimal? And I think that requires 3 parts. First of all, we need to make the buildings digital. So to optimize the control of those buildings. I will explain you in the following slides how that's done. Then we need to turn the building into a virtual power plant. And finally, we need to connect that to the whole energy system. So let's start with the first part, that how do we make the building digital? So if we look at a traditional building that's on the left side, in the traditional building, the heating is based on central heating. So every moment we need to decide somehow that what is the temperature of the water that we flow through the system. And typically that is decided with a system called heating curve, where we measure the outdoor temperature and decide the temperature of the water flowing through the system based on that. The problem with this is that these heating curves are typically configured totally manually. And maybe 75% of the time they are left to the factory settings of the heating controllers that once they were bought from the vendor. And when we have a poor configuration in the system, it means that at some points of time we are using too much energy, or at some points of time we are underheating the building. And in addition, this traditional system is not predictive, so it's not taking into account what is happening in the future. So let's say that sun starts to shine, or people come back home from work. The heating curve doesn't take those into account. And if I give you a practical example, for example, in Finland, where we have a lot of buildings in this system, the history used to be that when inhabitants complain about poor climate inside, the maintenance would come in and increase the heating curve for the whole building. That was the typical fix. And of course they would fix the problem, but at the same time they would heat up the whole building and increase the heat losses also from the piping. So how do we make this digital? That's on the right side. So typically we start by placing sensors inside the spaces to monitor the indoor climate. Then we connect to the heating controller from the cloud, and then we connect to the weather data provider. And we combine these three data sources together to build a mathematical model of the building. And we use this mathematical model to optimize the heating control and control it from the cloud. And this happens totally automatically. So every 15 minutes, there's a new message that this is the temperature of the water you should put into the system at this time of the hour. And the benefit of this is that we are replacing that manual configuration that was originally hard to do, and we are making it automatically. And now the system can also look into the future. So, for example, sun is going to shine in 3 hours. Let's start using less heat right now. And there's a lot of other potential as well when we make this digital. And of course, one of the most important things is that we also can improve the indoor climate for the users of the buildings when we do this. But let's look at some of the benefits of doing this. So one of the big benefits of making your building digital is that you can reduce the peak capacity requirement of the building. So basically this means that by reducing the peak power requirement by 20%, we can increase the amount of customers we serve with the same amount of capacity by 25%. Or it can mean that you don't need to use your fossil fuel-based peak load boiler during the coldest times of the year. And how does this work? There's two pictures here. And on the left side, there's a picture of what happens during the coldest day of the year in a typical building. And in this building, we have two sources of energy consumption in the district heating system. One is the domestic hot water heating, and the other one is space heating. And as you can see, there are two peaks in this picture. One is in the morning when people wake up and they go to shower, they start preparing food. And the other one is in the afternoon when people come back from work. And again, it's food and use of domestic hot water. What we do with lean heat on the picture on the right is that we use machine learning to understand the profile of domestic hot water heating, and we use the digital AI control to control the space heating to preheat before these peaks of domestic hot water and to reduce heating during the peak of domestic hot water. And this way we can eliminate those peaks. And the result is 20% reduction in peak capacity requirement of the buildings. So this was one benefit of digital control. Then another is energy saving. So when we have those sensors inside, we can control the building in a way that we can secure that they always have the best possible indoor climate. And this way we can on average save around 7% on energy. But there's a huge variation from building to building. So in some buildings we are actually using more energy because of course the meaning of heating is not to reduce heating, it's about delivering a certain level of indoor climate. That's the target. And sometimes you need to use more energy to reach that. But on average, if we take 10 buildings or 20 buildings, the results have been around 7% savings. So some buildings save more, some buildings less. And now I've explained to you the first part, that how do you make a building, how do you make buildings digital? Now we go to the second part, that how do we make these buildings, this demand, how do we make it, how do we use this as virtual power plants? And now on this slide, you can see the most elegant method of using buildings demand as a virtual power plant. And basically in this model, each of the substations, each of the buildings is exposed as a separate battery to the production optimization system. And the production optimization system can ask from each of the substations that how much flexibility do you have available for the future hours to either go up or go down in use of demand. And these requests can be done thousands of times to ask that what would happen if I do this kind of control. Then finally, when the production optimization system has realized that, okay, this is the way I want to control demand, they send a command to the battery to execute that flexibility request. And finally, Lean Heat fulfills that request and also reports on how was that done. And this may sound complex, but all of this is happening at software level through APIs. So the production optimization system can do millions of different queries for these different buildings all around the network, and it automatically results in the best possible control for the whole system in terms of production, in terms of network, and in terms of demand. And this we call real-time end-to-end optimization. But of course, this is the most elegant way of doing things, and sometimes it's hard to jump from first step to the last step. So we also have different, little bit lighter models that are easier to implement to start with. And here's an example of those from Finland. So on the left side, there's a light implementation that we did for Vatajankosken Sähkö. Luckily, this is a webinar, so you don't have to try to pronounce that. But in that customer, we had one target for demand side management, which was that let's minimize the peak capacity requirement of the system. And that didn't require any active participation from the production optimization system. Then we go to medium implementation, which we did at Porvoo, where we did network level load balancings. There the idea was that the utility provides us the information that what is the total energy need for the buildings, and then Lean Heat controls the buildings that we control in a way that goes against the profile of the other buildings. And that way we can flatten the whole network level balance. So the idea here is to reduce the whole network level peak, not only the yearly top capacity. And finally, the most elegant method is the one I already described. So in this method, there's a real-time connection from each building to the production optimization, and every 15 minutes it can be optimized according to fuel prices, according to weather, according to any variable that is important to the production. And one example from Denmark is our cooperation with HO4, where we have done where our objective has been to flatten out the daily power profile. We did this in around 10 buildings in the last heating season, and the result was that we were able to get 85% of the theoretical maximum reduction of the peaks. So here you can see that in the graph that the optimal one would have been the red line, where the whole power requirement of the buildings is flat. The black line, which goes up and down, is what it would have been with the heating curve control. And then the orange line is what we reached with Lean Heat. And we are very happy about this result because there's weather forecasts and behavior of people that we need to take into account. And of course, we know that it's not even the best weather forecast is 100% accurate. So this is a very good result for optimization. And then final part, when we control the production, when we control the demand, we can also use that for forecasting the demand. So with Lean Heat, we can get very accurate information about what the load will be in different parts of the network. And this information can be used in optimizing the production. But so now I've explained to you that how we can make our demand optimal, and why should we do that? And basically there was 3 steps: make your buildings digital, turn them into virtual power plants, and then optimize the whole energy system using those. And I believe the next presentation will be more about how to optimize the whole production system. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Impressive numbers you have presented here. Now the next presentation, I think we'll jump straight into that. In the meantime, maybe I should remind you that the chat is working. Charlie Drisdale, welcome back to our webinars. You must have a question. Helmut, Bjarne, Sasha, type some questions for these fantastic presenters. Søren, you are also most welcome to do something. Well, enough about that. Here you have a nice picture of Leif, who will give a presentation about state-of-the-art solutions for primary site operational and design optimization. Leif, just unmute your phone or your speaker. You already did that. Give it a few seconds for the presentation to load. It may be there. I'll click forward for the first slide, and you can start whenever you are ready. Go ahead, Leif.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll just continue where Jukka left, because he has been helping me supplying a very detailed analysis and prediction of the heat demand. And once we've done that, the next step will be to find the optimized thermohydraulic balance of distribution of the exact heat demand to be supplied at the right time to satisfy the consumer's need. For design and optimization of the thermohydraulic balance of the distribution network, Danfoss has developed the Danfoss Energies tool. With this tool, it's possible to effectively build and maintain district heating and cooling hydraulic network models. You can simulate the hydraulic and thermal conditions in the network. You can optimize on hydraulic conditions in the network, take into consideration how to minimize the pumping cost and deliver optimal set points to control systems. Energies can also be used as an online operational tool for optimization of expansions, refurbishments, and new connections. In terms of design and investment values, you can also make annual calculations on various scenarios to compare them. Also, that's also possible within Energies. Analysis of impact of expansion, saying what happens if we change something here, what is the consequence? Do we have enough capacity? Do we have to make any changes? What happens if I use a bigger dimension or a small dimension, and so on? And all scenarios we can work with time series, so we can try to see how does it operate in the winter and how does it operate in the summer operation to test the extremes. It's been used for development of contingency planning also. And obviously, when we make a lot of analysis and we have a lot of data in it, it's also possible to take out some of the information needed for other purposes, because everything is saved in a data bank.
Sorry, Leif, I touched something and I left, did something. Sorry for that. You're back in a second. Give it a second.
I think we are there now. So
there you are. Go ahead.
Yeah. In online mode, Energies will be connected to SCADA, so we can get real-time data and measurements from the SCADA system. And this combined with this allows us to get an unlimited number of virtual measurement points in the network. Typically, you may have 10, 15 measuring points physically out there, but when we get the real-time data in, combined with the historical knowledge we have, we can use this for updating the model, saying how is the spread of temperature, flow, and pressure in the network, and you can follow it backwards and forwards in time in the network. But having an unlimited number of virtual measurement points allows you also to always say that the so-called critical points in the network may change from calculation to calculation. So it's a way of how to optimize it. If we look at, we can calculate the optimal hydraulic parameters and apply them to the model. We can get an overview of how temperature, flow, and pressure is spread around in the network. And we can also find out where the production sources we are having, which are getting still more, what are the operating conditions at any time of each unit. Then using a weather forecast, by using weather forecast also, we can generate a load forecast which will enable us to simulate future conditions in the network. What happens if we close an area for a certain period, for example, for repair and maintenance? Where do we place the bypass for the service period? And what are the consequences of if we close down an area, for example, for 3 hours and so on? We can immediately see the consequences, and we can look forward in time. How we can look for the next 4 or 5 hours, and where do we get our bottlenecks, if any? Here we have an example also of the continual changing of heat consumption in a network also requires that we continuously adjust the delta P and flow. We have our iNet control in Danfoss, which enable us to work on an optimal network balance. There's an actuator on top of the valve which allows us to make remote adjustment of delta P and flow. And set points can be supplied at any time from energy source to optimize on this. Here we see typically that's a differential pressure network diagram, and what we do is that when we work with this, we try to keep the delta P set to system, and always if there are any variation, we try to adjust it so we keep within the level specified already. So, and that's of course to minimize the pumping costs. Now we've been looking at the demand optimization with lean heat and how energy is used as a tool to design and optimize and find the optimal hydraulic balance in a network. Next step will be to optimize on production sources and supply temperatures. To reduce heat losses and primary energy cost in the distribution network, the supply temperature must be kept as low as possible. Based on a demand forecast, a load forecast, and a real-time measurement from the network, an optimal supply temperature can be calculated. Here we see an example from a Danish utility from a winter operation scenario. Here you can see the potential for savings in the shaded fields. If I shortly explain you here that the red line, that's the supply temperature they were using. The green line is the optimal calculated supply temperature, and everything in between that is where we have the savings potential. So why have they been running with these high temperature of 91 degrees? That's because that they knew somewhere in that area is where they could have the highest peak, which is typically what we see on the green one, the morning peak, and the lower one to the right, which is the evening peak. But as they don't have any tool to play with this, they work on safe grounds. But as we can see from here, there are certain times of the day where you can go below 70 degrees in temperature. So there's a lot of savings potential. And what is very important here is to say is that these days where there are so many different sources, waste energy, biomass, and heat pumps, and many different sources supplying into a network, what is taken into account here for temperature optimization is the time delay from the production or supply unit out to the end of the network. So that's taken into consideration because we've seen many cases when we meet customers, they base the estimation of how they should run it for the future on the outside temperature. And we also face and realize from some customers, sometimes the heat get out there 1 or 2 hours too early or too late because they don't have any exact knowledge about how it should be. It's only done by experience. Obviously, supply temperature savings is equal to energy savings, which is good for our environment. What we also realize when you work with temperature optimization is you get a very fine thermohydraulic balance in the network, thus minimizing also the pressure fluctuations ups and downs in the network. And this, of course, gives less wearing and tearing on the network and minimize your maintenance costs. Then when we look at the production side, because now we had previously the demand side, and here we have the distribution side, and we had temperature optimization, and now we look at the heat production optimization side. And here it's important also to say what are we looking at, and that's a little bit like Luca mentioned also in the buildings. We can operate also with accumulating energy for a certain period. It could be combined in the buildings and or in the network, and it can also be in storage tanks. This allows us, because most production, or a lot of the production is combined heat and power, and then we have the possibility, we have some storage tanks that to play a little bit, when are the electricity prices high, when are they low, and we have to define all the production units supplying into the network. What is the capacity, what does it produce cost to produce 1 megawatt hour and so on, and then we can calculate and find a balance of saying how do we do this the most economic and technical, economical way, the best way and the cheapest possible way. Having such a tool we have to say that it's more or less needed to have a kind of tool doing this, because the more sources you get in, the harder it is to control how to optimize on this. And I had an example from a customer we were visiting. They had 4 people running around doing the production optimization because they didn't have any tool for helping that. And they say these two, they could at least save half of the manpower for that if they had a kind of tool that could help them doing this. So here we may have a good solution for them. Using this mentor planner production optimization tool helps, of course, reducing the heat loss, which is key for this, and that's done considerably. And it suggests the most economical operating schedule. You have a lot of relevant data in one place. That can be real-time data from the weather forecast and the load forecast, and from the SCADA system you can have in the picture when you see how is my production optimization run, and what are the figures behind this. You can have a lot of time savings, which I mentioned before, and you ensure also that the best possible production schedule and price for the energy you have to supply is obtained. And finally, having all this collected in one place and with a load forecast looking 5 days ahead, then you also have a very good planning tool, which also help your people in daily operation to optimize and be better in planning for the future. Almost finished now. Finally, if we look at what I've been talking about here, is that we start everything with some data input, which we have been through here, about the consumption flow and temperature and pressure and all the stuff, and weather forecast. By this we develop our load forecast, which is a prerequisite to be able to make temperature optimization and production optimization. And key for this is, of course, here that we can predict current day plus 5 days ahead, and normally we work within an accuracy for the load forecast of approximately 97%, which is regarded as being very good. Then I have here, we have an example from a Danish utility in Aalborg. It's the 4th biggest utility in Denmark. They have an annual heat supply of 1.9 million megawatt hours. And one of the challenges they had was that they had to reduce the heat loss in the network. The solution for that they found with Mentor Planner, and this result coming out of that has been that they have been able to divide the big network into 12 individual zones where they could optimize on each individual zones, and totally they've been able to reduce the heat loss by 14,100 megawatt hours, or in other words, reducing the total heat loss from 19 to 17% per year. And when we do things like this, it's not always done from one day to the other. In their case, it was done in 2 steps. The first step was because the billing was done by cubic meters, so we had to supply the same temperature all over the network. But even though they were limited by that, they still managed to reduce the supply temperature from 78 to 74 degrees as a first step. And at the same time, they decided also to divide the network into different zones. And why that? Because there are industrial zones, there are building zones, and there are private housing zones, or whatever how you want to define it. But the more zones you can divide it, and the better you can optimize on the consumption profile. So that was the first step. Next step was that they had to change the tariffs, and they introduced smart meters, and that happened, I think, it was over 3 years approximately. And once they had the smart metering system, they could change the tariff system, and then at the same time they had divided the network into 12 zones, and then they managed again to reduce the supply temperature further from 74 to 69 degrees. So, and this is where they totally achieved these 14,500 megawatt hours per year. And that brought together, if you compare the savings to the investment, it was return of investment in approximately half a year, which is very good. That was all from my side. It was 12.5 minutes.
Pretty much close to 12.5 minutes live. Thank you very much. I'll come back to you on the return on investment timeframes and ask all of you about that. Live, you'll also see there's 2 questions from Søren and Søren in the chat. I think we'll postpone that to the panel discussion, and then we will wash forward so we can hear the next presentation. We have already seen the nice picture of Milan, but he'll be back now with overall integration of end-to-end solution to district energy systems. Milan, your second slide set is up and running in a second. And while that gets up there, remember to ask questions in the chat so we have something to discuss later. Milan, I'll shut up now and over to you.
Thank you for the word, Morten. The picture is nice. It's 10 years old, you know. So, but waiting for the slide to load. If I may start with a recap of what we've seen until now from UK and Live. We talked about how we start optimizing the network at the demand side, mainly focusing at how we can reduce peak capacity and consequently lower investment into boilers and lower production costs by enabling us to produce heat from cheaper sources, and how we can actually optimize the heat curve and help end users save energy. Then we went to distribution, where we saw how we can use energies to improve design and to lower investment costs, and how we can improve operational efficiency using this digital clone concept, I would call it, which enables us to ensure quality of supply, to optimize maintenance costs, to also lower pumping costs by improving hydronic balance, etc. And then also part of Live's presentation, the production side, where we saw how we can lower primary side supply temperature, which effectively lowers heat losses and production costs, and how we can optimize utilization of production units and accumulation to also improve production economy. So this covers the kind of 3 parts of a district energy network. But of course, to do this optimization, these all tools need data. So we need to connect all these different parts, production units, substations, network, also third-party sources, data like weather forecast, and to provide this data to optimization tools. And this is why we in Danfoss developed also an basically monitoring and control tool called Danfoss Inspire, which in essence is kind of a web-based SCADA solution. It's customized for district energy, so that helps us to ensure that basically all the functions we developed, we fully focus on the functionality that brings value to district energy users. With aim that we make data integration easier, less time consuming. We are offering software as a service model, so it enables us to lower IT investment costs, and of course, being a web-based solution, it lowers also IT maintenance costs for utilities. For our optimization solutions and also for third-party system, we provide API connections, so we can provide data from the system to those tools. And yeah, I saw one of the question is already if we can connect also third-party devices or only Danfoss hardware. Of course, today, if we want to build a serious system, we need to stay open, and we support the integration of different kind of devices also from other producers, as long as they are built on some standard open protocols like Modbus and OPC. One big point with Inspire is also security. So we make sure that basically data through the whole chain is encrypted on the communication line, on the end user line while he's accessing the data, and also at the data storage line. Two case stories from Inspire, basically one of first two customers that we converted from an existing monitoring solution, St. Labrecht in Austria and Altensteig in Germany. St. Labrecht with 150 buildings and Altensteig with over 200 buildings. Some of the feedback we got for users from them, of course, the solution is helping them improving network efficiency by providing them active monitoring of return temperatures. Active monitoring of the whole network is enabling them improved stability, efficiency, and quality of distribution. End user satisfaction is consequently also improved, because many times utility is early notified about some issues even before the end user sees or recognizes it. They have an easy access to all relevant data, and they can access this data, what they really appreciate, basically from anywhere, from utility, office, home, or when they are in the field. Danfoss Inspire, beside being a monitoring and control tool, is basically an underlying data aggregation technology that helps us to connect all the different parts from district energy networks, production sources, end users, substations, pumping stations, basically everything, and gather this data and provide this data to the optimization tools. Also, data from third-party sources like electricity market, if we have CHPs and we optimize production of electricity, weather prognosis for load forecasting, any kind of other primary energy markets, we gather into data and then use, we gather this data and then use API technologies to connect all of these optimization solutions, which can then utilize this data, optimize, and then again backwards through Danfoss Inspire influence the operation of the system. I went through the benefits, and here are some quantifications, what we see from experience and from our customer testimonials by using tools like thermohydraulic modeling tools like Energies for network design. They can save around 70% of investment due to smaller pipes. By using lean heat and peak power optimization, we can lower peak power up to 20%. We can reduce heat losses up to 17%, and consequently, by combination of supply temperature optimization and production optimization, we can improve production economy from 3 to 5%. And most importantly, we using this kind of tools ensure optimal, stable distribution and quality of supply for our end users. So to recap all together, of course, Danfoss, as you know, is traditionally a company with a strong foundation and experience on building control components, different kind of flow, pressure components. In first stage, we are improving those components by introducing advanced digital technology directly on the components where it makes sense, of course, where we can optimize systems already locally, and adding connectivity, which enables us to connect these components through secure connectivity to our data aggregation solution, which is Danfoss Inspire, also a monitoring tool that enables you day-to-day monitoring and execution of operational tasks on the network, and also providing data for our optimization tools when we go again from demand, link heat artificial intelligence for demand side optimization, energies for network optimization and simulation, and Mentor Planner for production, temperature, and optimization. So that was basically all 4 presentations. Thank you all for listening from 3 of us, and looking forward to the questions and the debate.
Milan, thank you very much. Now we will jump into the panel debate. Oh, not that one, but this one. And I'll just move the slide forward. See, panel debate is on now. I think I'll open up. Charlie, thank you for your questions. Søren and Søren, thank you for your question. We'll come back to that in a second. All 3 of you collect a lot of data. Where are we on personal data protection? It's a big issue in some countries more than others. I know Germany, for instance, it's a really big concern. Live, you start, and then maybe Jukka, you even go deep into people's houses. How do they like that? Milan, maybe you have some comments. Live, go ahead.
Yes, it's an interesting issue, a topic to bring up also, because these days everybody is talking about data protection and so on. And we have been doing that now with several clients, and there are many of these so-called GDPR papers. I mean, it's more or less standard documents, and we have started from a standard document and adapted a little bit to we are sure that it covers the Danfoss way of how we look at it. So what we do saying, when we talk with our clients, we have our proposal for GDPR. And as we see the tendencies, and I mean, they all seem to be coming from some central sources within the EU, adapted with maybe within the local authorities in each country and so on, but it's 95% of what is all the same in those. So that there are some adaptations. So in other words, any of the clients who say, how do we handle this? If they are in a dialogue with us, we have a paradigm material we can send them saying, this is our standard version of what shall be covered. And our lawyers have been through that, and that should cover also what is required within the EU also. So I don't know if that explains all.
I think
we'll have to do that case by case. Yeah, the document is very much standard.
Jukka, you climb all the way into people's homes.
Yes.
You measure all details. You know exactly what they're doing it and when they're doing it. Is that a concern?
So, of course, it's a concern, but that's a concern that can be managed with technology. So first of all, when we do demand optimization, we can also do it without indoor temperature sensors. And then we are only connecting to the controller data. And that's, of course, in terms of privacy, it's much less of a discussion topic when we implement the system. But when we go into people's homes and when we start talking about indoor temperature sensoring, then from market to market, it depends on what kind of agreements and technology you have to have in place to fulfill the requirements, the legal requirements. But some countries are more stricter in this, some countries are a little bit less strict. But all in all, this can be handled with technology and the deployment methods. So it hasn't been a problem in the markets where we operate.
Okay, thank you very much. A major concern all over Europe, but also something that we can actually deal with. I think we'll jump now to Charlie's question. I hope you have had a chance to look at it. He would like you to go into a bit more detail on the opportunities this may bring to retrofitting existing networks and buildings, and what would need to actually be installed to allow for this. We have been discussing 3, 4, 5 different, I call them products, but maybe, is that you, Leif? Yes, it is. And then comment on also if this is a subscription-based service or a one-off cost thing. Leif, you first, then Jukka.
I'll try to hopefully hit most of what is asked for here, because I mean, let's say when we start looking at a network, it can be fully updated registration, or it can be an old one which is not updated and so on, and what is really required to keep it updated. These days, when you build a network model, you import traditional data from GIS, Geographical Information System, where you import it. Often you find out that it's not updated, but when you use energies as an example to build the models, it comes out with a list saying, where can I not find any connection? So I will be able to make a calculation. So it has to be linked together, everything. Sometimes it could be a double pipe somewhere. There could be no pipe, but they've got been for the last 20 years. And it could be some ends that are not connected. So what's interesting is we have to make maybe a few iterations where we say, this does not work. Please check this and this and this point. So at the end, when we do that 2 or 3 times, then we have our model. So in that way, we at the same time make an update and quality assurance of the GIS registration or AutoCAD system. So I don't know if that quite answers that. And the other thing we do is saying, let's say if during a year you get 10, 15 new customers spread around in the network, you don't have to go and update the model there, because it's normally sufficient you do it once a year, except if you establish a total new area, or you, let's say, make a new hospital, which has big influence on impact on the whole network. So old and new, and you can also say, when we do the contingency planning, for example, maintenance network, renewing and so on, of course we have old, when we import data, we can see how old are the pipes, which type of pipes, how is the insulations and so on. And we can also look at the demand and say, okay, we have these diameters of these dimensions in the ground now, but once you go and change it, because you can make a hydraulic analysis, it should be replaced with another dimension, for example. So retrofitting, saying it from the old going to the new, it can be a long process in terms of you don't change a pipe from one day to the other. It's 10, 15 years, maybe, or 10, 15 years maybe. But retrofitting could also be saying that you have an old network registration which is not updated. I don't know if I answer exactly to what you're asking about.
You missed one thing, and it's both from Søren and from Charlie. Is this a subscription-based service, or is it a one-off cost service?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
No, the reason why I say yes is when you buy the energies, you buy a license. That's a one-time fee. And then you pay an annual support and upgrade subscription, which is typically based on a 15% of the license value. That's the annual fee for getting support and update. So that's how it's done. And the investment in the license is a one-time investment.
Thank you, Leif. Istok, your question seems to be a little bit more detailed. Now, few short comments from Milan and Jukka. Then we'll end the formal part of the webinar and we'll go into the chat session afterwards. Jukka, you go first.
Yes, so first answer to Charlie about lean heat. So lean heat is primarily retrofitting to existing buildings. That's 98% of the buildings. So we use existing controllers as long as existing controllers can be remotely controlled. And if not, then the controller needs to be replaced. And the sensors we use are typically wireless sensors that can be easily retrofitted. So that's not a problem at all. And they are not absolutely mandatory if we only do the demand optimization. And if we talk about lean heat business model, it's we have a configuration setup cost and a subscription fee. But of course, these change a little bit if we put the whole network versus we put a few buildings. Of course, the fee structure changes a bit. And now coming to Istok's question that we use the available. Yeah, sorry.
Let's postpone that. Let's postpone that question to afterwards because we are running out of time now. Milan, give a few comments and then we'll go to the final session and then we'll do a continuous chat afterwards. Milan, first you. Unmute yourself, Milan.
Sorry?
Yes,
okay. Just two comments on the two questions regarding the business model and the GDPR topic. So regarding the business model, currently it's still a mixed part. So when we talk about lean heat, it's more a service oriented business model. When we talk about Inspire, it's software as a service business model. Energies and Mentor Planner currently is a standard, so typical software model where you buy the license. But in future, of course, we are also recognizing this need to introduce also the software as a service business model, and this is in preparation. And maybe just another comment to this GDPR topic and situation I was involved in a few months ago. I visited a customer in Germany. We wanted to present them Inspire, and basically what our colleagues told me is that I will have to prepare because they will challenge me about data security, about GDPR, being that our solution is hosted. So data is not on a local server with customer, but is located on our servers. And I expected, of course, the customer will challenge me heavily on this. So I also prepared really well. But actually, when I came there, I was kind of surprised because basically the customer started the meeting with explaining that they have a strict GDPR legislation now in place in Germany, and also some stricter changes are announced to come, and that they realized that there is no way that they can locally store the data and basically follow these requirements, how you need to manage and handle this data, and that they decided that they want a hosted solution where a provider of a solution of where they host the data is basically taking care of this. So final comment to this is that our solution is GDPR certified, so the data are stored on our data centers, and we do all the steps and handle the data as it's required by GDPR legislations.
Milan, thank you. Now we'll jump into the last part. This is actually the formal end of the webinar, but everybody can stay on and we will continue our discussion. I promised to finalize this before 2:02. I'm sorry I'm 3 minutes late. Now, if you want to receive the presentation given, and if you would like to receive Hot Cool, probably the world's best international district heating magazine, type your email here. But we would also like you to tell us that this was a great webinar. 2 already did. Thank you very much. Go on, give us some feedback. So, with that said, type your email, give your feedback. 3 already answered that question. Absolutely correct. And now, Istok, you asked. available, lean heat uses available flexibility request. Charles, no, sorry, Jukka, maybe you can elaborate a bit on that question. Now we're going into the details. Stay around if you're ready for details. Jukka, go ahead.
Okay, I already put some answer there on the chat, but yes, so when we calculate the available flexibility based on indoor climate boundaries, so basically lean heat takes care that we are never allowing too much flexibility that would sacrifice indoor comfort. And this is typically what we secure when the optimization is done. So if I understood the question correctly, yeah, this should be the answer.
Okay, that was fairly easy. I thought it would be much more complicated, but thank you very much. In general, I know it's actually a continuation of the panel debate, but Jukka, you did not say what your return on investment was for your investment. Life, you said half a year to 2 years, and for mental planning, less than 6 months. This must sell easily all over, or you're putting the prices way too low in Danfoss. But this return on investment, what is the most important? What is that makes the difference from one project to the other on what in return on investment is? I don't know who will start. Both Milan, you raised your hand. Maybe Milan, you go ahead. Milan, unmute yourself. I did it. Milan?
Yeah, sorry, the hand was raised from before. Maybe this.
Okay.
Yeah, life explained for mental planner and energies. Maybe Jukka can also explain about lean heat.
I'll hand over the word to Jukka. Jukka, go. Or Life, you can go ahead. Life, go ahead, please.
I can try to add. It's a combination of many things, of course, but what is important, I mentioned it shortly also during my presentation, that is you need to have a good load forecast. That's very important, and that we have a very strong and robust one in mental planner. And if you have that, that's important, of course, and also that you can, because you need to look ahead. It's too late if you just use an outdoor temperature and base it on that, because that's too late. This is one important factor. The other very important factor is also that you need a program which can take into consideration the delay in the network. Sometimes it can take 3, 4, 5, 6 hours to get from one production unit to the end of a network. So we have to be able to work in advance. There are many systems in the market built with sensors and all this stuff out in the network and so on. But you need to be able to predict and look ahead, and therefore you need forecast / prediction or weather forecast. That's that's imperative that you can see that. And of course, and the next step is also the more complicated networks are getting, the more important is that you have a tool that can handle many different units at different times and take that into account when you make your prediction and your best estimation for what should be the future load there. And then the last one I would stress here is that it's very important also, especially for big network cities, where you may have some ranged circles around in the network. You don't know which way the water is running. Is it circling around, getting nowhere, so you get a cold area in the middle of a network? That quite often happens in a big network. But having, for example, a real-time overview of how things are moving around in the network, you'll always also be able to see which direction is the hot water running. So these are some of the key points and some of the key advantages. And also that we always have the hydraulic balance. We know the balance between, now we reach a point where we don't have more pump capacity. So in worst case, we'll have to increase the temperature and vice versa. So this kind of balance in the network is very important, and that we learn from our history also, take that into account for future calculations. So these are some of the major things I would like to say.
Thank you, Leif. Jukka, return on investment, and what are the major sources that will influence, or the major situation that will influence the return on investment in your projects?
Yes, so of course for distributed energy provider, it's a lot about the production mix and how optimal it already is. But I would say that what I say to district heating companies is that do you want to burn more or do you want to cut demand? And cutting demand is actually cheaper than burning more. So when we cut peak capacity, I think typical peak capacity price is around 200,000 euros per megawatt. When we get lean heat capacity, we can get it down to 80,000 euros per megawatt. So it's much cheaper than traditional capacity. And the payback times we get are around 3 to 7 years, depending on the production mix. So if in the production mix there's a lot of flexibility needs now or in the future, that of course increases the return on investment. But that was it, sort of a short, concise answer here.
I think with that, we will start ending the webinar. Thank you to the 4 previous. Oh, I think Leif has something to say. He raised his hand. Leif, go on.
Just a very small additional comment to this. That is,
yes.
Now we talk about the different areas we're working. Important is that in Danfoss we have a full concept from the demand side through the distribution to the production. So see it as a concept where we cover the full value chain. And if you look also at the tendency, utilities are used to buying components. Often software has been a nice to have product, but there is a tendency now with this digitalization focus all over the world that it's going from being a nice to have to a need to have product. And this is of course where we would be the ambassadors for pushing in that direction.
Leif, thank you. Not thank you for stealing my last comment, but actually yes, digitalization data is going to be need to have and an important integrator of future energy systems. You said it so well, but you stole it from me, sorry. Thank you to the presenters. Thank you to all the participants. Later, if you shared your email, we will share the presentations and the YouTube film we have made about this. And you will be signed up for Hot Cool. Thank you, everyone. Oh, Miguel, are you writing something to us? Let's give Miguel a few seconds. Otherwise, we will close down and hope to see you next time. Follow our webinar series from the Danish Board of District Heating. There will be a bunch of webinars coming up next year. Thank you for now.